As society transforms in many areas, is women representation in the media also transforming? Are the women in the media in as much as they are on the media? As usual, you can look forward to our standard features, video of the week, and the game changer. Hello and welcome to Media and Society on SABC News, independent and impartial. This is where we give you the platform to probe how news is covered and angles are determined. My name is Rams Mabote and I'm your host. This show is not complete without your say. Connect with us via our social media channels and share your views and concerns about how the media works and what we feed you. Hashtag SABC Media and Society and call us on 714-6841 or 6842. The media has a significant influence on how social and cultural norms relating to women and to gender form and progress. On the other hand, women's image and the role they play in the media is impacted by existing social and cultural norms. According to a study conducted by UNESCO, on average, there were just 22% of women's voices heard in the news. Therefore, the media has a powerful role to play in how it depicts and transmits messages about women on television, print, radio, and overall mainstream media. In order for equality to prevail, it is crucial to have diversity in the media, including equal and fair representation of women. Joining me to tackle this and other related matters are Kubi Rama, who is former CEO of Gender and Media Southern Africa Network and currently Executive Director of Gender Links, and Luxolo Matomela, Technical Advisor at the German Developmental Corporation and UN Women. Good morning, ladies, and thank you so much for joining me. I truly appreciate that you could brave the cold from your bed and join me this morning. It's a very cold day. So let's start at the top, really. Let me start with you, Luxolo. Are we seeing more women in the media as opposed to just on the media?
Yes, thank you, Rams. You know, in terms of research that was actually conducted by Gwebi at Gender Links in partnership with the Step It Up for Gender Equality in South African Media project, what we saw was that overall, women are heard much less than men. And this was specific, I think, for television that we need to know is the gender diversity and GBV we were looking at were of the 5 biggest television stations in South Africa, looking at about 600 hours of programming. So SABC was part of the news channels within the study. And it was found that women are only 39% of news sources. And if we know that women are the majority in South Africa, this shows a really big discrepancy on how we're hearing women. But even more alarming, Rams, was that when we break it down by topic, and we start looking at matters of national importance like politics, like economics, women only constitute 30% of those speaking on that. So what that means to me sitting at home is that it's a man's world, right? Only the men can explain the world to us. Mansplaining is the way to go, as if there are no women who can explain matters of national importance to us. One other last topic I also want to highlight, Rams, is elections. Arguably the most important cornerstone of our democracy is how we choose our leaders. But in that time, when elections come up, women's sources only make 24% of the news. So this means that the agenda for elections is skewed towards a male view. So all of this data really points to a world where we see women might be seen, but are heard less, and even more significantly, on topics that drive national agenda, on topics that set the social and political agenda of the country, we're not hearing women speak on these issues.
Is it a function of history, or is it a function of what I would rather call ignorance of the importance of balancing all sorts of views, not only gender views, but youth views, racial views, cultural views? And I'm sticking with you, Nicole. I'll come back to you. I'll come to you, Kubi, just now.
Yeah, Rams, it's a plethora of reasons. We live in a highly patriarchal society. If I'm simply going to look at gender-based violence as a whole, we're looking at 100 rapes a day. Our femicide rate is 5 times that of the global average. According to the latest police statistics, femicide is going up by 7.7%. So this symptom that is gender-based violence is showing us a society that's seeped in patriarchy, that's seeped in sexism, that is seeped in unequal gender dynamics. And the media doesn't operate outside of this society. The media is within this society. So these social norms, these attitudes, these beliefs seep into the media as well. And I think what you and your colleagues within the media fraternity need to do, and this is where my colleague Gwerbe and Gender Links come in very strongly, is to actively make it deliberate to find and change these social norms. So Gwerbe and I were together facilitating gender sensitivity trainings for media practitioners so that all these biases, all these norms, you can start effectively challenging them head on in order to make that difference. Otherwise, people will simply take the road that's easiest, which is going with the norm rather than fighting against the tide.
Kubi, we in Women's Month as we speak, and one obviously sees a lot of coverage around women's issues. There is a huge slant towards that. Is that enough?
No. So, Rams, here's my question to you. Why are you having this program only in this month? Why haven't we heard about this before? What are the kinds of issues? Why are we only doing this now? And why is it such a focus in August and the rest of the year? We don't even hear about this. So let me give you some statistics. The caller has given you some, and now let me follow up. So in 2018, and it was launched in 2019, together with SANEF, the South African National Editors Forum, Gender Links conducted research into women in the media. And the figures overall don't look too bad. So overall, it's 49%. But then when you break that down into occupational levels, 60% of unskilled workers are women. And where it gets really telling, on boards of directors, you have 19% women, senior management 46%, and top management 36%. Now, the study that Lukola mentioned is called the Gender and Media Progress Study. Well, the one she mentioned was one that's focused specifically on television and news and entertainment that we did in partnership with GIZ. But the latest study, the research was done in October last year, shows us that 29% of news sources in South Africa are women. So those figures correlate, and it seems to be a case of, what's inside and outside the media is not that different, where women are located. So my point really is this. I take everything that Lukola said about the society in which we live and how we live and how it impacts on what we do. However, there's a disjuncture between how we run our businesses, how we run the SABC, for example, and what the content we're putting out there. What do I mean by that? I'm sure it's not acceptable within the SABC to have such disparate level, women in employment, there are certain things you can't do, sexual harassment, there are very strict rules. But that has not translated in the kind of content that is being put out there. The proportion of women sources in the SABC, 29%. The public broadcaster, the most important media, supposed to be
Kubi,
servicing the needs of all citizens.
Let me interrupt and ask this question, and there's probably two questions here. Is it a function of who employs whom? So would it work better if at the top the people who employed were women and they employed women, therefore coverage of women issues would be more balanced?
No, that's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is it is about fairness. Good journalism is about fairness and balance. It's about telling all sides of the story. And when in the political topic, the caller, 19% women's sources. So whose story are we actually telling? Yeah. a key principle of any good journalism is to have a balanced story with sources that represent different viewpoints. So whose story are we telling when we're excluding women? Now, if you employ women, it's not about saying women must, you employ women, then women must have higher representation of sources. It's about fairness and equality and equity. Why is it that we pay so much attention to the proportion of women in our parliament, which we need to read the figures, but we're sitting at 46% before the reshuffle? So how is it then in the political topic we have 19% news sources that are women? When you have 46% women in parliament, it's not a case that those women are not there and won't speak. It's a case of who we go to, who we consider to be the voices of authority.
Luxolo, and by the way, Kubi,
Yes.
I was not even misinterpreting you. I was asking a follow-up question. But Luxolo, I
Sure.
really want to know, when we talk about racial transformation or race transformation, we talk about affirmative action and we talk about employing black senior people in positions because it would help do things differently. I'm genuinely asking, would it help that we get more women employed in senior positions and more in numbers and therefore attract more voices in the media? Because for me, in spite of what Kubi and you guys are doing in re-educating people on gender issues and fairness, there seems to be, if not ignorance, then certainly lack of appetite for people like me, for men, to represent issues that really matter and to put women on the media as sources and experts and analysts.
So in order to answer your question, I'm going to make an example around the COVID pandemic to show you how important representation is, not only for fairness, but for also telling a holistic, accurate, and diverse picture of the world. So according to research that came out from the Melinda and Bill Gates Foundation, conducted by a lady called Luba Kasova, in terms of the COVID-19 pandemic, women are only 17% of news sources explaining the pandemic to us. Now, here's the problem, is if you don't keep the gendered lens on, here's what you're going to miss. Of the 3 million jobs lost last year, almost 2 million of them were women. The burden of unpaid care work, as we're in a lockdown situation, disproportionately falls on women. Women make up 70% of health workers, so they're the frontliners on the pandemic. In terms of the economic fallout, women feel the brunt of it more. Women in informal sector specifically, the fallout in terms of sex work and informal work, traders. So if you don't have women speaking on this issue, it means you miss all these important nuances. And it's what, Rams, we call disaggregated data. We've got to understand that the world affects men, women, and gender non-conforming people differently. So in order for us to tell an accurate picture of the world, we need accurate representation. So back to your question, do we need more women in leadership? Of course. But what we need more of, I would say, is to change the entire culture within the media fraternity. It's no use having just tokens, because another piece of research that we did into the entertainment media showed that although there were some women in higher representation, this also resulted in tokenism because they didn't have the power within that boardroom. So not only do you need women in leadership positions, but you need them to be able to exercise power and decision making and not simply just be tokens or figureheads to tick off the gender gap. So it's a holistic approach. We need women in because representation matters, but we need more to be sensitized around how everything affects men, women, and gender non-conforming, non-binary people differently. And then we'll actually start telling an accurate picture of the world.
Is there room, Kubi, for gender-specific coverage, as in maybe features, maybe specific programs that are focused on these issues, so that then those would be almost compelled to highlight the issues more than maybe news, which is limited?
Okay, Rams, here's a question. Of course, there's room for that. There's room for all different types of coverage. But here's my question to you. Why does it have to be different coverage? When you're telling, Luxolo's just mentioned, you're telling the story of COVID. COVID is everyone's story. It's the story of women, of children, of men, of gender non-conforming people. Just to give you an example, I think the figures for women are quite astonishing. The figures for gender non-conforming people are even more astonishing, because when you talk about the parallel pandemic of gender-based violence, many of the people in the gender non-conforming community have lost their jobs, have lost their homes, have had to go back to families where they're experiencing very high levels of GBV. Similarly, accessing if you're a trans person, accessing the vaccination is a real challenge. So there are so many different issues, and we're not seeing that. All we're hearing about are the numbers. In addition to that, I think it's a policy imperative. You can't have a policy in one part of your organization that pushes equality, equity, diversity, then in another part that has to do with content, it's non-existent. The two have to work, it's about a whole picture. I think we're using the word holistic, whole picture, balanced, accuracy, fairness. These are all the tenets of good journalism. So I think I put it to you, what does it say about the quality of journalism when we're telling not even half the story? We're telling a portion of the story. And it's not about who's employed where. Of course, women need to be equitably represented across all levels of employment in every institution. I mean, I think it's actually quite telling when you look at those figures from the glass ceiling study to say that there's 49% women overall, but 19% on boards.
Let's take a short break, and when we come back, we take your calls and tweets. Welcome back to Media and Society. We continue our conversation on women representation in the media. My guests are Kubi Rama, who is former CEO of Gender and Media Southern Africa Network and currently Chief Operations Officer of Gender Links, and Luxolo Matomela, Technical Advisor at the German Developmental Corporation and UN Women. Let's turn our focus on how the media covers gender-based violence. It is no secret that South Africa is one of the worst countries when it comes to violence against women. Rape and murder of women are reported literally every day, if not every hour. But does the media cover this appropriately and adequately? Luxolo, does the media cover it appropriately and adequately?
Man, we're taking you to task today, Rams, but unfortunately you and the media fraternity aren't doing very well on this front either. Again, of that research in partnership with Gender Links that was conducted, GBV as a topic, as a whole, across all the topics covered, only made 2% of the news coverage. So 98% of the time we're talking about everything else but GBV. And as you said in your intro, and I highlighted, this is an everyday problem. And then furthermore than that, what we found is that the media loves to look at any incident of gender-based violence as an isolated incident. So it is this one rape, this one femicide. And particularly if it's gruesome, the media will run it for a really long time. But you will find that it isn't told in a language that shows that this is a structural issue. It's not an isolated incident of gender-based violence. There's no such thing in South Africa, unfortunately, in terms of the social ill and what we live in. And stories seldom have information on where to get help. And if we know the reality that most of your audience would have gone through that, that could be a little 2-minute segment at the end of a story just to say, if you're going through this, here and here and here is where you can get help. There's usually a lot of sensational language that's used, euphemisms like sex scandal, sex pest, that really trivializes the story before it's even begun. It's not a scandal, it is alleged rape, it is femicide, it is sexual harassment. These are the words and the language we need to use. The study also found that stereotyping is still rife. the language we use can really open up room for secondary victimization of survivors. So all in all, we're not focusing on gender-based violence as much as we should in terms of the social ill that it is. And when we do, we fall into a lot of tropes that really undermine the kind of feminist work and feminist storytelling that we're trying to drive.
Just to ease your mind, Uxolo, this program is precisely for that, to probe how the media covers stuff. And so don't worry, be critical, because that's exactly what we want to do. The media does that all the time. That's our job. We criticize everybody. So it's our turn to be criticized, and we have to be looked at.
No, we're taking you to task.
Please hit me as hard as you want to. I'd like to take the punches. But let me ask this question, Kubi. What Uxolo just described, I have then to ask this question, why? Why is it still the same? Why are we still anecdotal about this reporting? Why are we still doing snippets and walking away from it? Why do we wait for a Rams to abuse his partner, and then that's big headlines, but this happens every day, even when it's not Rams doing it? I think you muted yourself, Kubi.
Yes, I was just trying to deal with dogs. Okay, so I think this is indicative of a much bigger problem. I think the way the media covers GBV is really also an indication of how we're dealing with as a society and government. We tend to be knee-jerk. We talk about parallel pandemics. We talk about all sorts of things, but we haven't really come to grips with how to manage the highest levels of GBV we have. And we tend to blame and shame, and women are asked why they wore short skirts, even now in 2021, really. So in regard to the media, I think it's an understanding. It has to start with understanding that GBV is a crime. It is not a social problem, it's a crime. Yes, of course it's a social problem, but ultimately, when you're reporting GBV, you have to report it as a crime, as you would murder, as you would any other type of crime. By changing the way we report GBV, exactly as Lukholo says, we trivialize it. We make it less important because it's a different kind of thing. It's not a crime. It's not as serious, whereas it is. Women die as a result of GBV. People are raped and their lives are changed forever. And the notion that, yes, it becomes big news when it's a celebrity is part of the bigger issue around gender reporting. That it's whose voice has authority, whose voice we give authority to. And that's who we perceive to be the people who have power, the people who speak and will be listened to. But we can change that.
How?
Ultimately the story, by, for example, having a policy that says that for every story you need to have at least balanced number of sources. You need to have women, you need to have men, you need to have gender non-conforming people. How difficult is that, Rams?
I don't know. I ask you because you're my guest. And would it help, Kubi, to continue? Would it help that when we do these stories that we keep some form of a monitor to show that, as we speak now, there's 300 women that got abused today or yesterday. We have a monitor on corona virus infections and deaths and stuff like that. Every single day we get that reported. Would it help?
Absolutely. And even with regard to corona, we're not telling that story, right? And we're not reporting the statistics, right? Can you tell me, can any of us here say how many women and how many men have been vaccinated? How many non-conforming people have been vaccinated? Do we know that? It's not that those statistics aren't available. Yes, they are. Now, why is that important? We need to know that. Then we need to know more. We need to know where are the people that have been vaccinated, which areas? Because the whole way we're vaccinating is very serious because you require a certain level of knowledge and understanding of technology in order to be vaccinated. Let's be clear. You have to register on EVDS. Now, so the story is being told, you tell me, yes, we have these statistics. But beyond telling us how many people have been infected, etc., etc. Do we get those statistics in a gender disaggregated manner? We wrote an open letter to the president on the 9th of August and said, we need those statistics. If we want to reach the most vulnerable in South Africa, we need to understand who's been vaccinated, where they are, whether they're men, women, gender non-conforming. And then we need strategies to reach everyone. It's very similar to GBV. The statistics need to tell us a story. It's not just about saying X number of women were hurt or X number of women were raped, because we get that. We get that in statistics. But I think a monitor is an excellent idea. More than happy to collaborate on the notion of a monitor with the SABC.
Polo, at the risk of sounding like I'm defending my tribe, there could also be an argument that news is a business. It would make more sense to have a headline that shows a Rams Mabote as a pig that abuses women than a Joe Nhlapo, who is unknown, to capture audiences and to get hands on newspapers. An editor will tell you it makes more sense to splash out a Rams.
Well, sometimes, Rams, I think we need to really interrogate this idea of if it bleeds, it leads. And if that really holds as much water as we think it used to in the end. Because it also depends, everything in terms of storytelling is about creativity and is about how you do it. So yes, a Rams might get you clickbait, but if you tell the story of Unomsa, Ekhaya Licha, who got assaulted in any way, how you tell that story, how you frame it, how you start creatively telling the story is where the work needs to be done. And if you're telling me that you can't tell Nomsa's story in a way that you can tell Ramsa's story, then it means we have a really lazy media fraternity. Because at the heart of it, media ethics, media news values is about fairness, is about accuracy, is about reporting the truth. So in order for you to set that truthful agenda, that lies and the onus is on the media to be able to start telling those stories in more creative ways. And, one last thing I also want to point, Rams, is, I say 100 rapes a day. That's 100 human beings. It just internalize that. That's 100 human beings a day who go through the worst violation and gross violation of human rights every single day. Now, if you're telling me that truth alone is not enough for you to be able to tell a story creatively, to be able to tell a story that represents accuracy and truth, then I would say we need to be hiring better journalists.
Let's take another break and come back to talk to our guests when we return. But I need to ask you to be part of this conversation. Please call us. Give us your views on 011-714-6841 or 6842. You can also tweet at SABC_MNS, hashtag SABC Media and Society. As we take our conversation forward with Kubi Rama and Luxolo Matomela, let's look at the issue of women being on the media, but not enough in the media. A cursory look at the media would show a lot of women faces. They are presenters, they are lead actors in soapies, they are even in adverts. And they are reporters in the forefront. We see them every day, my colleagues here. But when it comes to the voices, when it comes to the media representing voices of women, it is still largely a male game. The experts, the decision makers, the opinion makers, the analysts are still largely male. Am I exaggerating, or is this a correct observation, Kubi?
Definitely a correct observation. As I mentioned earlier in the program, 29% women sources in South Africa, measured as at October 2020, and 29% in the SABC. And I think I want to take up something that we started in the last segment around the economic imperative and selling newspapers, the sensational will sell. Rams, if we haven't realized already that that doesn't work, the economic crisis that media houses find themselves in requires a new way of thinking. It's not working. That model that says sensationalism works is not working. Look at, how many newspapers have shut down, how many media houses are in crisis. And there are various reasons for that. But surely one of the things we need to do is look at content and say, what are we doing that we can do better? Why is this content not selling in the same way it did, 20 years ago, 10 years ago? And I think Lukolo is exactly right. It's who story are we telling? Ultimately, we want to hear stories about ourselves. We want to hear stories that we can identify with. And yeah, it's great to hear about this celebrity and that celebrity, but it's not selling anymore. That you can get on the internet. Google is our best news source. But the actual real stories about what's happening in this country, we want to read and hear about ourselves.
Aren't we focusing too much, maybe could be on news? Wouldn't these issues be covered or highlighted in dramas, in documentaries, in actuality programs? Aren't we maybe not looking what happens there, that maybe as people watch soapies, they get to hear about these issues that are not highlighted because, again, news will tell you it's a 24-hour segment, a 24-minute segment, and that's about it?
I think it's a combination. And, how we tell the news is absolutely critical. I know, how many of us will stop everything we're doing to watch the news or read the newspaper. So it's a very important part of consumption patterns and how we find out what's going on in the world. But Lukolo and, together with GIZ, we did another piece of research around the entertainment media, soap operas and children's programming. And it's not that different. Yes, there were some very good examples, in certain programs where we spoke about gender-based violence, etc. But it's not that different. The general perception is that, men are the dominant force in the society and will be represented as such. But is that even true? Can we keep saying, we live in a patriarchal society, therefore this will continue? For how long do we say that and accept that that is the case? For me, I get frustrated. I've been doing this work for almost 30 years now. And that has not changed. And I'm saying to myself, when does it give? When do we actually see that shift, that wheel turn? And I go back to my point that I made earlier. It's really around policy imperatives and implementation. We need to now get much more serious.
Lutolo, I find it very ironic that every time I read up the news, I find that more young women pass the grade 12 more than young men, more women qualify from university more than young men. But when I look at the voices, when I check out an economist who's being interviewed, I see the same old men that I've always seen in the last 30 years, as Kubi says. What's wrong? How should this be solved? Who's going to solve this?
So in order to answer that, I'm going to pick up on what you asked about entertainment and drama. And one of the things that came up, because we did a study together with the National Film and Video Foundation, looking at gender-sensitive storytelling in entertainment media. And what tends to happen is that the women characters are these passive people where everything happens to them. There is no agency. So similar to the fairy tales we were told when we were younger, the damsel in distress, little princess waits for a dashing prince to come in and do the saving. So men are active and women are passive. If we take that premise to be the problem, then do you know what needs to happen, Rams? It's very simple. Agency. We need to be deliberate, especially the media. The media cannot be let off the hook on this one by simply saying they are a product of society, because the media sets the agenda for society, and because the media is highly influential in terms of how we think about ourselves and the world around us. What is going to change this is deliberate action. There is actually an organization called Quote This Woman, because a lot of excuses that people like to give is like, oh, well, I can't find any women economists, or I can't find any women scientists. And so Quote This Woman is a resource that can be used by you and your colleagues, where they have come up with reams and reams of many women who they can get to comment on this. So it's about editorial policy, and it's about being very deliberate, and it's about having agency. to say this is something that is actively going to happen. The same way that we challenge a journalist when they give us a story and we say, how many sources do you have? Is this accurate? Similarly, too, the next question should be, how many women have you quoted? Are you sure there isn't a woman expert on this? Go look for it. That kind of deliberate action is how we're going to see the change we want to see, Rams.
You say that the media sets the agenda, Luxolo, at the risk of sounding like an academic, which I'm not. Does the media, do they tell us what to think about or what to think? You know, do they dictate our thoughts or just put things out there for us to think about?
It's not didactic, right? Rams, it's not like I, as the media, say X and I have this non-questioning audience that takes it. Of course not. But in terms of how the media angles or start nuancing or starts telling stories, does influences where and how people start actively engaging with a story. So if you set a story and you've already victim blamed, or you've already made it about what she was wearing or what she was doing. You've already steered thoughts towards a particular area. So it's a conversation. We as citizens have a conversation with the media, but a conversation only goes as far as the thematic room you give me. So if you've already kind of confined it to this particular room, it follows too that the conversation will then be confined to that. So it's not didactic. It's not like a lecture where the media says one thing and everyone accepts. But does the media set an agenda? Does the media set a premise for the conversation and the dialogue? Most certainly.
Great.
Without a doubt.
Kubi, one last question, 30 seconds. Do we need a reboot? Control or delete? Start from scratch?
Yes, absolutely. And it starts with training. I think journalism training is key. How we're integrating issues around gender, around good journalism, Rams, good journalism. I come back to it all the time. What is good journalism? How do we do good journalism? How do we do better? And it's policy and implementing that policy. So saying, for every story we need X. When we do content, entertainment content, we need to ensure the storylines are actually, out there in a way that provokes thought. I don't think the media actually tells us what to think, but it certainly puts things on our agenda. So yes, a reboot is required, and it's required now. It's not required, in 10 years. Or when GenderLinks does the study in 5 years, those figures will not have moved much. So I don't want to be dead when we finally, reach some level of gender balance in the media.
I'll tell you what else I need, Kubi, is to take a break now and conclude our conversation. So thank you very much, Kubi Rama and Luxolo Matomela, for your insights. We are not done. We need to revisit these issues often and not only during Women's Month. Online business publication Umbele operates in the African language media market as it publishes news in isiZulu. The platform, which was established by Langa Kanyile and Slindile Kanyile in September 2020, publishes news in economics, business, labor, personal finance, agriculture, SMEs, and executive profiles through articles and podcasts. Our producer, Lovela Jongilanga, caught up with the co-founder of Umbele. Take a look at this.
Umbele is an online business publication. It is strictly a Zulu business publication, but we cover basically what, if you think of a business publication, would cover, which is economics, business. We cover labor, personal finance, SMME. We also cover executive profiles. But a lot of our content is driven by entrepreneurs. So a lot of it is centered around profiling SMMEs. But we do cover other issues such as, budget. We cover the civil unrest, the impact on businesses, both small and large. So just the general economic stuff as well.
So with Umbele being an online Zulu publication, strictly vernac, what sets Umbele apart from the other existing vernacular media outlets?
It is precisely that we are niche for starters, because the other vernacular publications that exist cover general news, so like your politics, crime. So we don't cover that. We are just strictly business. But what also sets us apart is that we tell our stories in both text and audio, because we also have a podcast channel. And also, we are not driven by breaking news. So a lot of our stories, as I said, are profile driven, and also feature-ish. So it's your evergreen type of content. So those are really the three main things.
So with the publication being a publication that, is strictly in vernac, like I had said, who is your target market, and also why isiZulu as opposed to any other of the languages that exist in South Africa?
Okay, our target market is really anyone and everyone who is interested in accessing business and economics news in Zulu. But it is primarily the lower end of the market, because we believe that that market doesn't have that much access to this type of content, because primarily it is content that is published in English. And what we are trying to do is precisely that, which is to create broader access to this type of content. And we opted for Zulu because, well, that is the language we can write in, other than English. But having worked in both English and vernacular media organizations, we identified a gap that in this market there is a space for a publication like Umbele. And initially, when we had the idea, it was a newspaper. But, with where the world has gone and the outbreak of COVID-19, it just made business sense to restrict it to a digital publication only. Yeah.
So for someone who is interested in checking out Umbele, how easy is it to access the platform?
It is very easy. We are on www.umbele.likanyiletm.co.za. So whether you are using a mobile or desktop, you can access us. But what we've also done is we have content sharing agreements that we have in place, which also creates even wider access to our content. And the biggest one, which is, a very new agreement, we actually started it this week, is we have entered into an arrangement with a mobile app called Ayoba. So if you download the Ayoba app, you'll be able to access Umbele channel. And the nice benefit there is that if you are an MTN user, they give you free data to access the content. So that's definitely going to go a long way in creating even wider access. But we also have a content sharing agreement with Ilanga newspaper. So some of our content is available in a print product through Ilanga. But yeah, our website is available whether you're using mobile or a desktop device.
So I understand that the publication has been in existence for about close to a year now. Talk to me about some of the challenges that you faced with the platform.
I think, the primary one would be that we have obviously entered into a market that has established brands. So it has been to create brand awareness. And the publications that we compete with are not only online, but they have also the benefit of being available as a print product, on the shelves. So that has really been the major one. And of course, trying to convince advertisers that, we may be new in the market and We may obviously also not have an audience as large as the older competitors, but we are worth trying out. So those have been the major challenges. But slowly but surely, we believe that with increased brand awareness, we will get there.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And also, what has been the government's reaction to the platform?
I would say it's been positive. We are on their media lists, whether it's WhatsApp groups or, the emails, we receive statements, invitations to the press conferences. So from the communicators side of government, it's been easy to access, and it's people that, we've always known, having been in the industry for a long time. But again, trying to access some advertising, that has been a struggle. And, it continues to be a struggle. But again, we live in hope.
Now let's talk money. Let's talk money. How are you guys able to monetize the platform? Have you guys been able to monetize the platform?
Not really, because currently we have a subscription model, and we do have some subscribers. But again, because we are a new brand, and we are online only, and generally, audiences are not used to paying for online news. That is also still something that we continue to work hard on. But, we have been able to convince some people to take up subscriptions, and we continue to do that. And we believe that all these other things, while we may not have, reached the point where the publication generates the kind of revenues that would make it viable on its own, but we do believe that all these other little initiatives, the content sharing agreements, will eventually get us to that point as people get used to the brand. We are also, we remain in the midst of a pandemic. The recent civil unrest hasn't helped. So even just generally in the economy, the market is tight, whether you are a new media brand or an old media brand. Everyone will tell you that they are struggling. So it would obviously also, and it is something that we anticipated, but fortunately within the company, yes, there is Umbele, which is a publication, but within the broader parent company, Likhanyile, there are other services that we offer, which are the services that have been there for many years, and that part of the business is fairly solid. So thankfully for those other services, we are able to pay bills and put food on the table.
So noting how the journalism industry has been somewhat declining in terms of numbers, publications are closing down, journalists are losing jobs, how critical is it to have a platform such as Umbele for the future of journalism?
I believe it is very important. And I think what we have done and have shown is that, it is possible, to enter the industry as an owner, even though you may not necessarily have that much financial backing behind you. Because honestly, yes, we do want to create jobs, and in a way we are already, because there are freelancers who contribute to our publications, and there are other service providers such as our webmaster who are benefiting because our platform exists. But even to be able to create the jobs for ourselves, as journalists, that on its own is also important. And I think what we have demonstrated is that there is definitely an appetite for more niche publications. And obviously technology, helps in that it reduces the barriers of entry, and I think we will see more and more because there are other publications, online publications that have launched after we came onto this market, and I think we will see more.
So with Umbele turning 1 in September, which is next month, talk to me about some of the plans that you have in place for the publication moving forward.
It is to continue to grow brand awareness and to drive subscriptions. We said from the onset that yes, we will go after advertising. It is an established revenue model, but it is not the model that we really want to be heavily dependent or reliant upon. We would actually prefer to be rather dependent on subscriptions. Yes, that will take some time, but we believe that when things do consolidate and it all comes together, it will be worth it, because with subscriptions, it is money in the bank in advance. And what also helps, with subscriptions is that it is also the user who is paying for the product. And so there's also that appreciation, and so that is our plan, that, we continue to grow brand awareness. And we continue to knock on other doors. We have been trying to fundraise. There are people who have made some funds available, donor funders. We've submitted applications, and we continue to, look out for those and apply, and also hopefully continue to maintain the quality of our content. One of the most positive feedback has been that, our content is quality. And so we would like to maintain that as well. Yeah.
Umbele, thank you so much for sitting down with me and taking time out of your busy schedule.
For our video of the week, we take a look at a clip of President Cyril Ramaphosa, who made another appearance at the Commission for State Capture. On Wednesday, probed on who recommended the appointment of Brian Molefe at Eskom. This is what the president had to say.
And I'm not so sure now of the sequencing, but one of the things I then did when I saw President Zuma was to say, let us appoint Brian Molefe as the CEO of Eskom, close the war room, and he has proven himself to be quite an effective CEO, and let's give him the responsibility of doing so. Then there will be one entry point, and all of us would then stop what we were trying to do with regard to Eskom, because it leads to confusion. So that was my take, and the chronology could be.
This testimony by the president drew mixed reactions on social media, and this is what some of you shared. There's a tweet from Synthate. It says, I was not aware that state capture was taking place. I learned about it through the media. Then later, when told that the issue of Brian Molefe and the links to CUPSA were all over the media, Ramaphosa, I was not aware. I'm shocked. Fanafuti Biela says, so Ramaphosa kept quiet all along when the media said Brian Molefe was a Gupta family appointee. Today, he tells Mtiani Commission of Inquiry into State Capture that it was him that recommended Brian Molefe to be appointed as Eskom CEO to Zuma. Well, thank you for watching and participating on Media and Society on the SABC News channel, independent and impartial. From me, Rams Mabote, goodbye and God bless.